Hello everybody, and welcome to Kimberly's Conspiracies. Today, we are going to be discussing We Used to Live Here. I thought I'd get through this intro without laughing, but there's no chance. I am just such an unserious person that I knew this was never going to work. Anyway, I just finished reading We Used to Live Here. I feel like this is the book that is everywhere on the internet right now. I definitely broke to peer pressure and I ended up picking this book up, and it was the best and worst decision of my entire life. Now I feel like my house is cursed. There's entities walking among us because this is just one giant conspiracy theory. I mean, that's literally what this is, and I don't know what to do with myself except also curse you as well. So sit back, grab some popcorn, because this is gonna take a while. This is gonna be filmed in different segments all throughout the day. So I may be wearing different things. I may look a little bit weird, look a little bit unhinged. I still have to skim the rest of it again. I wrote in this book, okay? If you are a normal person who comes to this channel regularly, I don't write in books. I wrote in this book, and I also tabbed it. I really don't ever tab either. This book has traumatized me to the point of it lives in my brain for forever. That's what it is. That's what it is. And yes, yes. I don't know what else to say about this because I feel like we just need to get into the story and we need to get in to what really happened at Old House. So for those of you who don't know, this is going to be full spoilers, obviously. If you want to read this, I would definitely take a hike right now. If you don't care to read this because you're not either a horror fan or you just don't feel like reading it, definitely stick around because this is gonna get crazy. I don't know how much of this will make sense to you. I'm hoping it does. I'm trying to break down the story in a way that is easily accessible to people. And yeah, I feel like they're just gonna have a good time. The reason, so I did give this a 5-star. I'm gonna talk about this briefly in my part 2 October reading horror books thing. It's just, this is going to come out earlier. It's just how the scheduling has worked out. But I feel like, really enjoy this book. You really need to be a person who loves overanalyzing things and are willing to spend 3 hours on Reddit to learn everything you know about this. Because this is actually written by an author who started out on Reddit with the no sleep thread, and he writes his stories on there, and there's a ton of short stories and other stuff going on, and they all connect back to this book. So there is like it's basically like a Marcus Clyweir universe. Like he has his own universe basically that he's made. And so if you really want to get every ounce of information and nugget of knowledge from this book, you have to be on the Reddit thread for hours. And I did that, so you guys don't have to do it. That's what took so long last night. That and me starting to reread it. I did get halfway, a little over halfway, so thank goodness. But in this very first segment, we are going to set the scene. This is for me. I doubt you can actually read it from far away. My handwriting is atrocious, but this is for me to remember what's going on so I can reference it, because there is so much information and so many different things going on. So if you don't want spoilers, don't look at this and leave, read the book, come back. If you're here for funsies, let's get into the story. We're gonna set the scene for you right here by talking about our characters and our house and what is going on, because it's a lot. So probably the most important thing in this book is remembering who and where you are. The house where the story takes place is in Oregon, and we're kind of on this, imagine this kind of very twisty, kind of secluded road where there's only like 4 or 5 houses on it. We are in 3709 on this road. So very remote, very isolated. Our house is on 5 acres. And it's just very quiet, and it's an incredibly old house. Like you can tell it looks like it's probably the oldest one potentially on the block. Bring in our main characters. We have Eve, who is definitely our main girl. Also a paranoid girly. We all know them. We probably are all them. So she is a bit paranoid. She kind of has this imaginary friend that kind of talks in her head. I'm not really gonna bring it up because I don't really know how important that is. That is one of the loose threads that I never kind of figured out. Some people have some theories. We might bring up some of the theories at the end, but as of right now, we're gonna pretend that that doesn't matter. But she has this like talking monkey that talks to her in her head, and she is one of the owners of 3709. Her partner, Charlie, or Charlotte, also a co-owner of the house, and they're kind of like flippers and renovators, and they're trying to decide if they want to renovate the entire house because it needs a ton of work, or if they just want to tear it down and restart. Of course, our other main character is Shiloh, our bestest doggo in the whole world. And the important thing to remember about Shiloh at the beginning is Shiloh's very shy. Shiloh is a rescue puppy, and the only people that Shiloh trusts are Charlie and Eve. Very important. And that brings up the start of the plot. So we have our setting, we have our characters. It's time. It's time to start. Because once we start, we can't stop. Like, this is a train that has no brakes. So, we introduce the newbies. The newbies are a family that show up one day at Eve's front door while Charlie is away in town. And town is kind of far away. Like I said, this is a very remote area. You have to go all the way out to town. The only thing that's close by is an abandoned looking motel and like the neighbors that are still kind of far away from you. So this little family of 5 arrives at the house and says, hey, I used to live here. I know this is kind of imposing, but can we come inside? And I want to show my family the house. And in my head, I'm going, never. I wouldn't have even opened the door. I wouldn't have, no way. Not a single chance would I even open that front door. But Eve she doesn't want to say yes. She is a very introverted, uncomfortable, paranoid person, and this is her literal nightmare. She's also super passive in everything that she does. Charlie is normally the one that would make decisions. So Eve goes, says, hey, I need to talk to my partner first, see if this is okay, because it's kind of weird. Like, I don't want strangers in my house. Like, I got stuff in my house. I don't want people coming in here that I don't know. I don't even like maintenance people coming into my house. So we find out that his name is Thomas, and he's got Thomas, Paige is his wife, and then you have Jenny, his daughter, and then his 2 sons are Kai and Newton. Eve starts to kind of like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to my partner, and Thomas is like, hey, it's kind of cold outside. There's a winter storm going on. Can we just step into your foyer? And I'm like, no, you can't. And Eve is like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. And this little monkey in her brain is telling her they're never gonna leave. Once they're inside, they're never gonna leave. And I'm sitting there going, listen to the monkey, because the monkey apparently knows more than you do. So anyway, Eve lets them all inside. They're warming up in the house because it's pretty cold. Their car's supposedly down the street. They're moving out to Minnesota from Oregon. And so Eve goes and tries to call Charlie. Charlie picks up, says hello. Just kidding, it's really her voicemail. She does one of those stupid jokey voicemails where it's hello, oh, hi, it's Charlie. She's away from the phone. So she gets mad, doesn't leave a voicemail, and goes back and says, hey, Charlie is not comfortable with you guys staying here. She uses the Charlie card instead of just saying, hey, I don't feel comfortable with strangers in my house. And Thomas is like, oh, okay, that's fine. Let's go. Jenny, the little daughter, who's got her little Blue's Clues notebook, is like, do we have to? You lived here, I want to see it. So Eve cracks like an egg dropped on the sidewalk. I mean, folds like a folding table. And it's like 15 minutes. 15 minutes, you can look around the house, but I'm gonna follow you like a hawk. So she follows him around the house, and it is clear that Thomas has lived here before, or at least was in this house. He knows where the coat rack is, he knows where closets are, he knows like where weird stuff is located. He says, oh hey, there's the tile. You can just see the tile that used to be there under the wood floor. And so Eve looks over there and she's like, oh yeah, that actually is right there. We're kind of just meandering around the house, and she's kind of enjoying the little anecdotes now. It's kind of fun. And they get to this one room and there's a stained glass window, and Thomas is like, oh, that's so weird. I thought this was in a different room. Like, that's so strange. And we don't really think anything of it. We're just like, oh, I guess the previous owners, because it's been a while since Thomas's family has owned the house. He grew up as a kid there. Probably the previous owners just potentially moved it. They didn't like the previous location of it. 15 minutes kind of up. They've been there for a little bit longer. Jenny wants to go to the basement, but it's locked, and Eve's like, oh, no. There's stuff down there. No. I don't remember if she said if they'd been down there yet, but I do know that she just didn't. No. It's already been 15 minutes. Get out of the house. So Jenny's sad they can't go down in the basement. She's kind of staring at the basement like this. That's what I'm picturing, at least. And then they're kind of putting their coats on. They're kind of talking. And then we're looking around and we're like, where'd Jenny go? Where did she go? Like, Where is she? And yeah, Jenny ran away. Apparently, Jenny has a habit of playing hide and seek, and it's a kind of hide and seek where she won't come out for a while. Like, you can find her, but she's always in these little crevices apparently, and she won't come out. So, of course, she's in the basement. Thomas and Eve go down to the basement, and Thomas does the little... I was really scared for a second if something answered. But they do that, and they hear the little knock knock, and they're like, oh, it's Jenny. But this basement is massive. I mean, it keeps going. There's some weird stuff in the basement, and you're not sure, like, why some of the stuff is down there. And we find some ants. We find some ants that are all moving in the same direction, and she kind of follows them around the basement, and they kind of coalesce at these different rooms. And so she's like walking through stuff, and it's hard to keep your bearing in the basement. It's difficult to see exactly where you are and what you're doing. And then she comes across Thomas, who is just standing there, unmoving, won't respond, until she walks up to him, and he's like, oh, sorry, my hearing isn't what it used to be. I don't know why I was just standing there. I don't either. I also don't have a guess for this one. I kind of do, but we'll get into it later. We're not there yet. I need to ease you into this, because if I go too hard too fast, it will not be fun. And it will scare you. It will be like, what are you talking about? So we're gonna leave it at that. Thomas is just a little forgetful. He's just a little zoned out a little bit. So we find out that Jenny, it seems like, we can't see her. Thomas says she went into this little crevice thing. It's really hard to get into. Just leave her there. She'll come out eventually. So we go upstairs and we start cooking dinner and doing dinner things. Oh, and I forgot. While they were going through the house originally, Jenny was writing down every single thing she could possibly think of in her little notebook. That is, I think, important later on. So that is an important point. But at this point, I believe this is the first reality change. So this is... This book is broken up, what I believe, into different parallel universes or realities. It is not known which one it is, but it does seem like either there's a hallway or it's the basement. We're not sure which one. It's like, because there's like a hallway near the basement, I think. It's a little difficult to picture, but it does seem like that or the basement are portals. And it seems like when Eve went down to the basement and came back up, something changed. We don't know it yet, but something has changed. But this is the first break, we believe, in original story, original timeline to this new one. So from this first original parallel universe, what is important to remember? I have lists. These are consistencies that we need to remember throughout the whole book. Charlie's voice message is a very important one. So in the first reality, Charlie's voice message is the joke voice message. And it does seem to change as the book goes on. We have the fact that Charlie is a non-sentimental person that again becomes important in the second reality. Shiloh is a very shy dog, doesn't want to go up to people, doesn't trust them, won't go up to anybody, doesn't like new situations whatsoever. The dog throughout the book, I feel like, is one of the keys. That is one of the things we have to remember as well. Eve's phone, that is an important one. So right when she comes upstairs, she looks at her phone again and her phone is cracked. And she doesn't remember that happening. She's like, that's kind of weird. Like, I don't remember that being like that. And I think that is the first key that's like, hey, we are actually in the second iteration of what this is. And then the stained glass window. The stained glass window is very important because it changes. It moves. So anyway, that is the setup of the story. And that's the interesting part, because this is actually a section that people disagree on. So most people do agree that this is the first moment that we actually never meet the original Charlie. We just hear about her. We meet her at the end of the book, and that's how you can kind of tell what the original situation is versus what is right now. So all we know is we have this family who is acting like everything is the same. Eve is kind of confused because things are starting to look a little bit differently, and Eve wants these people out of her house. Basically, she starts feeling like something just isn't right. At this point, I don't think at any point you really know if it's just shifting realities in this house or if we are physically somewhere else. That is, I personally think we're physically somewhere else. I think there's like an entity that is swapping where we're located. I think the house is an entity working with other things and other people. And Eve has been transplanted to a slightly different parallel universe, basically to like, so she doesn't catch on right away. And by the time she does catch on, it's too late. So I think we are slightly shifted to a new parallel universe that it's close, but it's not quite right. Okay, welcome to reality 2. As we talked about, it is most likely either parallel universes, or there is a theory, I don't think as many people believe in this one, there is a theory that it is like Satan, it is the devil, who is slowly warping reality and twisting them into this other like timeline situation, or trapping them in like a liminal space type of thing. Not sure. Liminal spaces we're not going to get into because that is a whole other thing. If you want to know what a liminal space is, look it up, but that will send you down a rabbit hole. But it is possible that Eve from this point on is really just in this liminal space where these entities exist and that they're like faking being other things. I still think it's the parallel universes, but we'll just go with reality 2. This is reality 2, and at this point onward, this is where it starts getting shaky. I feel like the first swap in reality was rather obvious, but it happens so fast. That's kind of like the twist is like, oh, we actually never met Charlie. We never met the real Charlie. From this point on, it's difficult to tell who is swapped, who is where we are in these universes and realities. So I'm gonna do my best approximation of what is going on. But reality 2, this section is probably the smallest so far that I've gotten through, and I don't know. There is a argument that reality 2 and reality 3 are the same. We start off reality 2 with coming back up from the basement, and they're kind of talking about Jenny and how Jenny's just not the same kid anymore. And that is really important to remember. Thomas says this to Eve, and this is something that Thomas says a couple of times about different people. And we do learn something kind of about this phrase and why he says this. We're also waiting for Charlie to arrive home, and once we come up from the basement, she notices that her phone screen is cracked, and that is the first like, oh, okay, we are officially somewhere else. And she's got voicemails and missed calls from Charlie that she didn't notice. Her phone wasn't ringing or something like that. So that does seem like, hey, we're somewhere else, and those calls came in that other universe. So Charlie finally comes home. She apologizes for being late and immediately seems kind of different. Eve kind of expected Charlie to get mad, kind of kick them out, be ready to like be like, no, you cannot stay here, or be a little more aggravated by the situation. But immediately Charlie's pretty at ease with Thomas, and she's also a lot less like she's not a very sentimental person, is what Eve has said multiple times, and she's already kind of like just kinder and softer than kind of how we've been led to believe that Charlie is like. It's also pointed out that Paige and her family are religious. So Paige is supposedly the really religious one, and Thomas is kind of following in her footsteps. They don't have phones because they're on a detox for that. They're part of a big church group, and there is a Bible in the house that has Eve's full name on it, and that is important for later. Jenny finally comes upstairs. She is sobbing, and it's like, okay, she's a kid, but it does seem like an odd overreaction to the situations that happening, and her family's like saying we're sorry. She does all the time, and Jenny's just, I mean, she's just screaming sorry over and over and over again. She's not apologizing for hiding. She's not apologizing for not listening. She's just screaming sorry and is inconsolable. And it's an odd reaction to what was going on. She also has red marks on her hands, seemingly from using the dumbwaiter. Also pointed out in this section that Paige's personality is a bit it conflicts with itself sometimes. It seems like she hates being the overbearing parent, but she still does it, but she's also supposed to be soft at other times. It seems like she's almost playing this role that she doesn't necessarily want to be in, but she's doing it anyway. And Thomas is like the nice guy who's blaming everything on his wife, and it's it's an odd dynamic. Also kind of at odds with Paige's past, which people can change. People change all the time. They find a partially removed tattoo on Paige's neck. It still has, it doesn't say partially removed, but it says it's very faintly black lined. And then the cool thing about this book is there's information between chapters, and the information between the chapters has a little section about tattoo removal, and it says it should leave a scar, but it shouldn't have any black lines left. And that's kind of like oh, so it seems like something interrupted the tattoo removal, which is kind of odd, or she's in the middle of getting it removed now. As the family is finally getting to leave, Charlie points out that the weather is really bad and they have closed the bridge that leads out of this area. There's only one way in and one way out of this neighborhood, and now the family is going to have to come back and they are stuck for the night. They kind of situate the family upstairs out of the way, and Charlie and Eve finally get like a moment to themselves and they chat, and Eve notices this necklace, this locket around Charlie's neck, and it is a picture, it is old locket, and it's a picture of Eve, and they joke that it's the only known picture of Eve Palmer because she hates having her picture taken, and it's kind of her, like, it's a blurry photo of her, like, kind of hiding her face, turning away from the camera. So then, before they were able to go to sleep, they hear some noises, and they go to the front door, and the front door is wide open, and Thomas is just outside in a trance. Oh, the freaking fridge just started making noise, and he is in a trance out in the snow, kind of like his trance downstairs, and he's kind of mumbling to himself about Allison, and that is a very important name to remember. And so we go inside, and Thomas ends up telling the women about his sister and kind of the tragic situation going on, and how his sister just kind of slowly lost her mind over time. She felt like things were moving in the house. She felt like they were no longer themselves, and she would kind of question them about things that only they should know, that an imposter wouldn't know. And so she just slowly went crazy, and then that's kind of the end of the story. Oh, on that note, Charlie and Eve end up going to bed, they go to sleep, but something at 3 a.m. wakes up Eve. This was the first moment that I was like, this is kind of terrifying. So she ends up hearing something. She's kind of hungry though and thirsty, so she doesn't think anything of it, goes downstairs and notices the basement door is open. This is the moment of uncertainty, okay? She does not go in the basement. She thinks Jenny goes in the basement, goes to the top of the stairs and does the little knocks, and hears the knocks back, and she says, Jenny, it's time to come upstairs. And then she sees a childlike shadow downstairs and is kind of like, hey, get up here, like get back upstairs from downstairs. And then it stands up, and it's a fully grown adult standing at the bottom of the stairs. So she slams the door and runs. She never enters the basement, and when she goes upstairs, Charlie is there. That's important. And this is where we don't know what happens with this reality. This is the weird part. When we wake up in the morning, Charlie is not there anymore. Fortunately, the family is. The family is still there. And Thomas tells her, oh, Charlie went to town, and she told me to tell you that she checked the basement. It's all good. So there it is right there. There are two kind of possibilities. It's important the basement is brought up again because there does seem to be a switch in reality again, but we're not sure. We could still be in reality too, but Charlie, this Charlie 2 could have been removed from the world. But it does seem like Eve is in a different reality. We'll get into it, but it has to do with her phone and other things that are going on that are different from reality 2 to reality 3. So I'm gonna call it reality 3, and I'm gonna say that it seems like overnight something happened that took Eve to reality number 3. I don't know what it is. I have not figured it out. I haven't seen anyone talk about what that switch was, which is why it does seem in this situation less parallel universe and more warped reality. So this is an argument for warped reality, that she went to sleep and woke up in another reality. She didn't have to actually go through a door. So I don't know, because there's hints later that you do have to go through doors or something. Very quickly, the consistencies that changed to point to it being a reality number 2 is Eve's phone is cracked. That is a big one. She doesn't remember cracking it. The phone messages that were on her phone that she didn't remember getting. Lockett and Charlie's general demeanor is just very different than Eve seems to be remembering her like. She's not a sentimental person, and she probably should have been more angry at Thomas and his family. And then Allison. This is the first time Allison is brought up, and just remember her name was Allison. So let's get into reality number 3. It's like an hour later. Because we started getting to the section where I hadn't like remade notes yet, so I had to do that. It's just stressing me out because the more I go over it, the more I'm like, wait, is this what happened? Especially at the section I'm at right now. But let's talk about reality 3. Potentially reality 3. I think it's a separate reality. I don't know. I'm getting more and more confused the more I go over this, which I feel like is supposed to be the opposite. I feel like I should be getting more clarity, and it's just getting more convoluted and confusing. But let's assume this is reality 3. So like I said, Eve wakes up, Charlie is gone, and she goes downstairs. The family is still there. They're kind of using her house, which is very unsettling, and they're making breakfast, but they just seem so chill. Like Thomas is just so calm and cool that you're kind of like, I'm being paranoid, right? Thomas tells her that Charlie went into town, and oh yeah, she checked the basement and there's nothing in the basement, which is, I think we're good. I don't think Charlie was transported. I think Eve at some point was transported based on the stuff that I've been reading. So Eve decides, let me call Charlie, because this seems kind of out of character for Charlie just to leave me here with these strangers, but she can't find her phone. So like I said, one of the consistencies is Eve's phone, and her phone is missing in action. She has no idea where it is. And then of course, no one else has phones because they're on the phone technology detox or whatever, so she can't get a hold of anybody. And she then sees Charlie's locket. Another big consistency throughout the book is Charlie's locket. And Charlie's locket is hanging on a nail on the wall. And that's weird. It's really, like, Charlie wouldn't have taken it off. Or Charlie 2 wouldn't have taken it off, because Charlie 1 we've never met. How crazy this book has made me. So she decides that she's sick of it, and she is going to go to the neighbor's house. She's going to go walk over to 3708. And I did find this interesting because pretty much everywhere I've lived, the house directly next to yours isn't the direct, like, the number. So like our neighbor is we're 03, and I think they're 05 or even 09. Like it like skips a lot of numbers. So she ends up at 3707. I don't know if that's important. I don't know if 3708 not being there is significant, or it's just like a red herring kind of thing, because the neighborhoods are done strangely. But this is more of a rural neighborhood, and that might not be as much of a thing. I don't know. But anyway, she shows up at 3707. Shiloh is like super excited to be outside and is like flopping around, being a super happy puppy, which is kind of odd because at this point we've only seen Shiloh really nervous, even just outside, any type of surroundings that are new. But he seems pretty excited, which Shiloh is one of the big consistencies in this book. So I would say that is also an inconsistency with normal behavior and his behavior in the previous reality, which to me points that this is reality number 3. So she shows up at 3707, and it is this neighbor named Hannah, and she is this old lady, and she actually knows Thomas from when he was a kid. She actually babysat Thomas, and something weird is going on with her house. So this is where we start getting into the real conspiracy theory stuff of the book. This is where I feel like we start getting enough information that we can start talking conspiracy theories. And so I personally think that Hannah and 3707 and potentially other houses in the neighborhood, including a cabin that we will get to, are extensions off of Old House. And Old House, I think, is just like this giant entity that's potentially underground, and it like connects all of these houses. That's kind of what I think, and it connects to other realities. So that's where it starts getting a lot. Because while we're at Hannah's house, she notices a light go off when Hannah isn't in the house, which is suspicious, and Hannah kind of is like, oh, I have timers. I think that Hannah is either one of the entities or she is a trapped person and she's just playing along with the universe that we're stuck in. That's kind of my thought process, because something is funky in her house. I also think, we do get into this later, I'll explain it later, but there is a replacement ritual supposedly that can be done, and that's the only way that you can like get out of Old House. I think Hannah potentially during this visit is trying to perform a replacement ritual, or Old House is trying to trick Eve into reality number 4 early, instead of waiting for her to go back to the house and try to get into reality 4 over there. So basically they're sitting down for tea. She tries to call Charlie, and here's another inconsistency. Charlie doesn't know who she is. Like, it's very obvious now from having read the whole book, but Charlie is not Charlie in this section. Charlie is Charlotte. This is where we start having the major swaps in personality. So I kind of think, again, this is very convoluted. I kind of think reality 3 is actually reality 4. And when we move to reality 4, that one's actually 3, because it's a slow progression, but this reality 3 that we're in is kind of a big jump. Like, having Charlie go from her partner to an ex-partner and go by Charlotte, and that's who she is a huge jump. And then when we have the next reality swap, it goes back into a more comfortable space where Charlie is Charlie again. So it's almost like we went from reality 1, which is real, reality 2, and then reality 4, and then we're going back to reality 3. I know it sounds crazy. This is why this book is insane. It's so crazy. So anyway, she tries calling Charlie. She calls her Charlie, and Charlie's like, what? And she's like, when are you coming home? And she's like, what are you talking about? Are you okay? So you figure out kind of later, once you know the situation better, that this is Charlotte, and they are not together. They split up a while ago. They are exes. And when she tries to call Charlie back, the voicemail, which is another consistency throughout the book, is just a beep. It is not Charlie's normal thing. So the other possibility, I don't think this is it, but one of the theories is that the phones are able to connect to the different universes, and that potentially Eve called a universe that was like out here that we're going to go to in a little bit, and not the one that's closer in. So we could still be in reality 3, but she called like reality 6 kind of thing going on, where it's super away from her own reality where Charlie is Charlotte. So that is a possibility, because the phones were acting weird and kind of making beeping noises and making just strange statickiness. So it is possible, but there's evidence later on that proves, I feel like she did call Charlotte from reality 3. So after this, we sit down for tea with Hannah, and Hannah ends up telling Eve the story of Thomas and Alina. So this is important, because people in the story besides Thomas are referencing Allison as Alina. So she talks about how Alina wasn't actually the daughter. She showed up, no memory of who she was, nothing. She was a very strange girl, and the family took guardianship of her, and Thomas was actually the son of these two people, but he was an only child, and he just had like the sister Alina. Then it turns out that Alina basically went crazy and stabbed him 37 times. I don't know the importance of the numbers, but 37 is 3708, 3707, stabbed 37 times. There's a couple different things and numbers that pop up throughout the book. I don't know what the deal with the 37 is. I have not figured that one out. If it's definitely, there's no way it's a coincidence with how detailed this book is. So something is up with 37, and I feel like it's almost like if something is 37, potentially it's in this world. Like maybe it signifies it's in Old House in this like broad universe thing. I don't know. Or it's just made up. We never got like 100% clarification if she really did stab Thomas 37 times. After we kind of learned this, it kind of makes sense now why Thomas has like, he's got like pock marks and stuff all over his face. So that kind of matches up with that story. She did find it odd that the names are different, and Thomas didn't really bring up the fact that he was stabbed by his not sister, and that he keeps saying my sister, like very specifically saying my sister, which is it could be a kid thing. Like, he could have seen her really as his sister. Starts getting a little bit spooked. Oh, the whole monkey thing, I'm kind of just skipping it because it's just an extra layer of, like, I feel like proving realities are different. So the thing with the monkey is she had a toy monkey as a kid, and it had white fur, and it went missing. It just totally disappeared, and that's the voice that's in her head, like her imaginary friend. And then she's at this woman's house, and she finds a monkey that looks exactly the same, but apparently the monkeys are supposed to be brown furred, and apparently there's no such thing as the white monkey in reality. So that's kind of odd. I don't know how that plays in. I don't know if that means like Eve was in an alternate reality before, or something from an alternate reality landed in the real world, because that's also possible, and that's why it disappeared, because it didn't really belong there. I don't know. I don't know. So that's confusing. That's why I've kind of left the monkey out, because it's just this added layer of something that I could not figure out anything about. That's going to be a search that I'm going to be on for later, or hopefully gets explained in maybe subsequent books or short stories. So after she sees that, she kind of gets a little weirded out, and she decides, okay, it's time to go. It's time to go. And then the phone rings. And when she looks at the phone, one of the doors is open at the end of the hallway near the phone. And again, I think, and Hannah's like, oh, I never get calls. Are you going to go answer that? And she says it like twice. And in my head, I'm like, something's wrong. Something is wrong. So my conspiracy theory about this part is Hannah, again, is trying to go back to like her real world potentially. And if Eve takes the bait, she'll be able to do like a replacement ritual, and she'll get to go home and Eve is trapped. Something like that. Or this is just part of Old House and it's trying to trap her into reality 4 early, instead of her going back to her house and going to reality 4 there. So something is weird though. There's something wrong. And again, there's a document later that talks about these anchor locations that are almost impossible to escape once you're in them, unless you do a replacement thing. So I'm curious if Hannah is stuck in this house and that would have been the replacement ritual, and this is one of those anchor locations that's impossible to get out. So either way, I think 3707 is a trap. I think that house, that situation, that woman, that whole thing is a trap. Don't really know though, because that wasn't explained. So anyway, where was I? So she ends up leaving, and she goes to this, Shiloh takes off running, and Shiloh ends up at this abandoned looking decrepit cabin. And what is scrawled on the front is Old House, which we know is like the overarching thing. There's something going on with Old House. When she goes inside, she turns around and there's just tons of papers and stuff, like crazy drawings. Don't go here because there's an entity here that'll follow you. Like that kind of stuff for the whole area. And there's like abandoned hospitals, asylums, and it all looks almost underground. I think there's a network underground that leads to all this different stuff and all the different realities and universes. And then when she's about to leave, a man shows up. He's an old man, and he's got a nasty scar on his face, which is super important to the end of the book. And this is one of the other potential conspiracies. I'm trying to think of how to go about this, because it's all spoilers, so I don't need to like reveal it later. I guess I'll wait because that's really important. That happens at the end. But he has a giant scar, and he basically says, you're not supposed to be here. Like, you're not supposed to be here. And then he stops her and says, those people in your house, those aren't what they look like. That's not what they look like. Like, literally he says, that's not what they look like. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Because it's like, he didn't say those aren't the real people. Those aren't the people you think they are. That's not what they look like. That's so much more terrifying. That is so much more terrifying. And I do have a theory. I think every single person in that family has been trapped, and they're all playing a role. I think they've all, besides Thomas. I don't know about Thomas. That's the prevailing theory online, is nobody knows exactly what or who Thomas is. He seems to be the epicenter of things, but then there's moments where he seems like he's just another trapped person. But you don't know. But I think he's been trapped there for a really, really, really long time. So we don't know. Yeah, so she runs away after he says that's not what they look like. So terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And that's kind of where I stopped, because there is a massively important document right after the end of this chapter. So we are still in reality 3-ish. Like, I think we're about to change to reality 4. No, we're still in reality 3. But there's a huge document coming up that I need to explain a lot of stuff from. So that needs like the entire whiteboard just for that document, because I'm going to explain a little bit about what it is before we get into it. It's basically this, so like I said, there's documents between almost every chapter, and I did not say there's Morse code at the bottom of each of these pages. I'm going to tell you what it reads out at the end, because it'll make more sense at the end, even though it still doesn't entirely make sense. But anyway, there's this document that a historian got a hold of, and it seems to be a hoax paper. Like, it brings up a bunch of stuff that doesn't exist, and there's a coded message in the document, and it's just a lot of random ramblings about this place called Old House. So we get a lot of information from this document, and now that we kind of understand the background and the fact that things are disappearing, this kind of is almost like a key to the book. Like, it helps you understand a lot of the book. So I kind of need the entire whiteboard for this document. So we're still in reality 3, but we're going to move into that document next. Okay, it's time to talk about the document. This is probably the most important piece of information in the book. Like, I feel like gives you the best explanation about possibly what is happening and who is doing what and who is who and what and who is trapped. So it's very convoluted in the way that it does it too. So we're first going to start with, there's hidden messages. So there are capitalized letters within the entire document, and it says the old gods see all. So there's that. And the important thing about knowing about the document is there's the document, and then there's the person analyzing it. And the person analyzing it is not from the same universe as the document, because the document is writing about people who he doesn't think exist, and animals that don't exist, and just generally things that don't exist in his world. So somehow this document has made its way to another universe. And that's what it seems like. It seems like objects can travel through universes, which would be a thing about the monkey. So anyway, there's also other coded messages. The problem is, I have not seen a single thing about what the actual coded messages are. So I don't know what the symbols are, but there's 2 strings of coded messages. There's also a thing in Latin at the very end of the document that says, don't forget whose or which house you're in. People are differing on if they think it's whose or which. So either one works. Like, basically try and figure out where you are, because you need to know what house you're in. That way you can get back to your reality, because that's what we find out, is that you need to see what the inconsistencies are to say, oh, this isn't right, this isn't my world, and that way you can somehow find your way back to your actual reality. Which is why we've been keeping track of the consistencies throughout this whole thing. So the document goes on talking about these things called the Gelsheimer ants, which don't exist in this guy's world. I'm pretty sure those are the ants that they keep finding in the basement. So I think the ants know how to travel between worlds, and apparently these ants are known for being around Old House. I'm starting to think that the guy who wrote this is potentially we'll talk about it, but a tourist of Old House. We'll get through those rules in a second. And then, yeah, so basically he outlines what he has learned about Old House, and it seems like the people stuck in Old House, or the entities and the objects, they each can be defined into specific roles. So we have a host, which is a person that has been stuck there for greater than a year, and at that point is incredibly difficult to escape. There's a guest, which is under a year, which is what our main character is at this point. Eve is definitely a guest. Like, she's been there for like a day, but we also don't know how time works. Time can be funky. We don't know how it works. We have a guide. I don't think we've met a guide yet, but it is a person who is able to navigate Old House, who has some sort of knowledge of Old House and can hopefully get people in and out. Then we have the tourists, who are basically travel under a guide. They hire a guide to bring them into Old House, and oftentimes these tourists become hosts or guests. We have a trespasser who enter on purpose, or what is it? They enter without a guide accidentally, or for nefarious purposes, monetary purposes, etc. I'm interested in that one, because what is the difference between a guest and a trespasser when it comes to accidental? So do you have to be under a guide to be a guest? I feel like I'm a little bit confused on those two roles. Then we have an anchor, and it's a non-human entity or a host that has been trapped too long. This is what I think Thomas is. I think Thomas potentially is an anchor, and he's able to, at this point, warp reality, because they have other names for anchors, which is like trickster, spirits, poltergeist, that kind of stuff. So I think Thomas, at this point, is an anchor, and he's warping realities to kind of get his way. And then you have a hatch, which is a structure or entrance to Old House. Shortcut, jump location, it's higher. You can jump locations using a shortcut. And I'm curious if the locket is a shortcut, because the locket is funky. It's really weird. I don't understand everything about the locket. I don't think it's just a consistency point. And then you have a hook, which is a room or section that's impossible to escape without a ritual replacement. And in the document, ritual replacement was crossed out. So this is what I'm talking about, ritual replacement, in the previous clip. I think the trapped people are attempting to, it almost seems like they may be trying to compete with each other to do a ritual replacement using Eve. I think that's potentially what's going on, and I think that's why, so in a lot of the other documents, we have people going missing, and specifically it's like groups of 5 people going missing, and I'm thinking that those groups are being used for the replacement rituals, so they end up getting stuck, and hopefully the other people are getting out. I don't know though, but that is a theory, because we have a family of 5 specifically. So it does kind of hint at, hey, you may need 5 people to get everybody in and out. So that's a thought. And then, yeah, I said Allison at this point is probably a host, because she's been there for a long time, it seems, but probably was originally a guest. I really think this is where I'm torn, because Thomas, we learn about it a lot later, but there's something up with Thomas and Allison. There's something weird going on there, and so I don't know. That's why it's hard to tell what Thomas was originally. Like, what is Thomas? Then you have Jenny, who I think is still a guest. I think Jenny, because she's been going to the basement, she's trying to get out. I think she still is actively trying to get out. And I think she is a guest. I think she's been under a year. I think she's still pretty new to this. That's why she's writing everything down. I think Jenny is really, really smart and is keeping track of what house we're in and what reality we're in. Then you have potentially Thomas, I said, could potentially be an anchor. We have Paige. I think Paige at this point is a host. I think she potentially has been there for a little bit. I think she's now playing her part and is kind of stuck there. And it does seem like they are hosting. They're the ones who almost own the house and are trying to like flip it around. Like when she came down for breakfast and they're cooking and setting up the table and stuff, it's almost like they're hosting Eve. So maybe. So I'm thinking Thomas and Paige, at least Paige is probably a host now, and Thomas is either a host or an anchor. And then we have Hannah. I think Hannah is part of Old House, and I kind of think she's an anchor. And again, I think she was trying to do a replacement ritual on Eve in her own house. And then we have Kai. I think Kai is an anchor because he's being weird. Like there I'll show you in the next part, but there's a part where he acts oddly in the next grouping. And then I think Newton is either a guest or a host. I think he's a guest. He's very shy. He still doesn't kind of know what's going on, and he's very submissive towards pretty much everybody else in the family. So I think he's potentially a guest still, like Jenny. Oh yeah, and this is a thing I want to bring up before I move on, because I might not remember this, but there is some speculation. I can't find this anywhere, but there's speculation, and I'm gonna go look into it more, that Marcus's next book is called The Caretaker, which a lot of people think has to do with the man who lives in the cabin. So I think that potentially he keeps the worlds maybe separate, and that's why he said you can't be, like, you're not supposed to be here. Like, she's not allowed to see all the secrets of Old House. So I'm interested to see if that's really what's going on. So anyway, that's the document. This point on, it turns into not a dumpster fire, but I don't know what's going on half the time after this point. This is the point that marks the, okay, you have knowledge of what's going on. Let's go. Let's go. So we are staying in reality 3 for a little bit, but it switches pretty fast at this point to reality 4. So we're gonna figure that out. I gotta figure out how to write that down, because then it goes from reality 4 to like question mark, reality question mark. Like, again, almost a liminal space kind of situation where she exists and doesn't exist at the same time in between these spaces. So we're gonna see. It's gonna move fast after this. I know it already has moved really fast, but it's gonna move real fast after this. Okay, we are in the home stretch. We are in the home stretch. This is probably the most unknown where we are in the timelines situation. Besides kind of the end, I feel like is definitely more clear cut. We are in a liminal space, and then like we are clearly somewhere else situation going on. This is where I feel like we are rapidly almost moving through sections of time, and we're not sure exactly where we're at. So getting back to reality number 3, he gets back to the house, and the family is still there because they did not want to leave the house unlocked, supposedly. And so she's like, okay, I'm gonna go get tire chains because the weather's gotten worse. You have to leave. So she goes upstairs and goes into the attic, which who knows what the attic is at this point either, but the attic does seem attached to the basement using like the dumbwaiter system potentially. I'm not exactly sure. That again was a little bit fuzzy. The attic is also massive as well. So she goes up into the attic, and there's a lot that goes on up in the attic. There's noises, light switches going on and off, her flashlight going on and off. There's a lot of stuff going on, but basically she ends up finding a box. Now this is my proof that she is in a reality 3 and Charlie has not been transported out of reality 2, because she finds a box that says Charlotte's stuff, donate. Clearly it's Charlotte, not Charlie in this timeline. So we are in some other reality compared to the last one that we were just in. Also, yet again, we find the phrase, don't forget which house you're in, and that is carved into the upstairs, which is terrifying. And that makes me think that the attic is potentially a location that's difficult to get out of. I don't remember what it was called, but I think potentially the attic has trapped people before, and that was what was carved in there. And then we also found, so she is looking outside and she sees Thomas, and Thomas goes and makes sure he can't be seen, and then he hits himself, like smacks the crap out of himself, and then he like lights a cigarette and starts smoking, and you're like, that's weird. So kind of my conspiracy theory about that situation is I still don't know what Thomas is, but moments like that make me think that he is possessed, or he is still a host, or could be an anchor and just wants out and is kind of hyping himself up to do the replacement ritual, potentially. Thomas does seem like a character who kind of wants to be there, so he may be an anchor that wants to exist in this space, but that almost is like he feels kind of bad for what he's doing and is kind of like hyping himself up to do the replacement ritual. Because there are moments, like I said, where he has like almost lucid moments when he talks about Allison as his sister and seems legitimately confused about what's going on. So that's why it's like, who is he? Like, what is Thomas? And that's what a lot of the internet was like freaking out about, was what the heck is Thomas? I feel like everyone else can be explained decently. Like, they all seem like they've been trapped here, but Thomas just like is something else. He seems like something else. And there was an interview, one of the middle pages in this section, there's an interview that this police officer does with this kid who's all of his friends went missing, and none of these friends apparently exist. He doesn't exist. His friend in a coma doesn't exist. None of these people exist. And so they've obviously been transported into a different world through the basement, because that's where they all went, was in the basement. And they talk about, for a moment, it seems like something almost like goes inside of him, and it like stares at the camera, and then it goes back out, and it's like, what's that? And that goes back to the old gods see all. I don't know. It does seem like there's some overseer seeing what's going on and assessing situations. So I don't know though. So after we see all that, we're still in the attic, and she ends up seeing something moving, and it's a woman dressed in an old hospital gown. And we pretty much assume this is Allison. There's a thing that talks about an escaped person from psych ward. Pretty sure Allison escaped and is basically in the house trying to find a way back to her family. Then Eve falls out of the basement. So we come to a odd area where we're either in reality 3 or we're in reality 4. I'm not 100% sure, but some stuff is definitely, this little section definitely seems more fluid in what space we're actually in. Like the house, it's almost like the house is becoming not entirely set in one space. Like it's almost like a liminal zone where things can change, and it's odd. So basically she falls out of the attic, and she sees, when she wakes up, Newton and Jenny are playing with Legos, which she's like, where'd those come from? I don't have those. Paige is sitting in a red rocking chair. She also doesn't have that. And Paige kind of explains it like, oh, we got it from the bar, and it was brought in because I have a bad back, stuff like that. But it's like, that's weird. that's weird. That's not supposed to be here. And she ends up thinking that she sees her phone. Like she's getting really claustrophobic. She's like, everyone just get away from me. So she goes over and she sees that Kai is playing with a broken phone, and she like grabs it from him, and Shiloh ends up running into the room and attacking him, which is very not Shiloh. Again, that's an inconsistency with the dog. The dog just would not probably generally do that. So that is kind of like, okay, we're still not in the right reality, but are we back to reality number 2 with the cracked phone? But then she sees the phone and it's not cracked, and Kai said, oh, you smuggled my phone in, whatever. And it's like, something's not right. And then Paige flips out and is screaming at her and trying to get them out of the house. And this is my second instance of thinking Paige is potentially trying to help, which I think she's a host, like a neutral host, and she's kind of trying to help by getting them out of the way, because she originally tried to insult them. I think I forgot to talk about this, but when they were at dinner the first night, Paige was talking about how, oh, does your family know your lifestyle? Like, it was almost like she was actively trying to insult them to get them kicked out of the house. So this is instance 2 of Paige reacting in a way that would get them kicked out of the house. So I am curious about that. So then it turns out it doesn't seem like her phone, but this was my hint at Kai maybe being a trickster and was purposefully changing her memory to think it's her phone to create that situation, and kind of, because Kai's position in this, I don't understand. He's very sly and manipulative, so that's why I think he's an anchor, and he's kind of enjoying doing this and being in this situation, but I'm not 100% sure. So then she goes to find Shiloh because Kai kicked Shiloh pretty hard, and he ends up hearing Shiloh in the basement, and so she opens the basement, hears him whining downstairs, runs downstairs, and then sees Shiloh at the top of the stairs, runs back upstairs. And this is where I think we are definitely now in reality 4. So potentially this is either reality 4 or 5, depending on what this was, but we're gonna say reality 4 for easy sake. So we are now in reality 4, and we are back to Charlie, which is why I'm like, are we actually in reality 2? Did we go back to another universe with Charlie 2? Because Charlie 2 acts pretty similar, but there are some differences that make me think it's reality 4. Charlie comes to the house. Thomas and Charlie kind of meet driving past each other, and Thomas clearly tells her everything. This is really important because Thomas is the only entity, well, the family is the only entity. I would say Thomas. Thomas is the only entity throughout every universe that consistently talks about and acts like he knows everything that's happened in every universe. So he's the bridge between the different realities. Like, so between 1 and 2, Charlie, when Charlie's not there, when Eve wakes up, Thomas is the one who tells her, oh, she checked the basement and she went to town. But that wasn't actually true. Charlie didn't exist in that reality. So he is actively manipulating Eve in all the universes, and I think this kind of helps prove it, because like at some points you feel bad for Thomas and you're like, oh wait, is he actually just a person? Like, but this points back to him having a bigger grasp on the situation, which is why I think he's like one of the main entities or anchors in the situation. So Charlie comes and picks up Eve because Eve is like, I'm not going back in the house. Charlie goes back in the house, sees that the window is different, which I find interesting. So now I'm like, is this Charlie number 2 transplanted into a different reality? That's what that section right there I'm not sure about, why Charlie knows that the window was changed, because you would think Charlie would be like, oh no, the window hasn't changed at all. So I am confused about that. So I cannot explain that. End up going to the motel, which is spelled different, which proves we're not in the correct reality, because this one has the C is there, and in the original one the C is missing. So that is like, okay, definitely that is different. And Eve ends up kind of questioning if Charlie is real. She starts getting a little more paranoid. The voice in her head is telling her, figure out if she's real. She questions her, it seems okay. She wakes up in the middle of the night from there's a call incoming on Charlie's phone from Eve. Eve picks it up, and it's Eve's phone, and it's Charlie saying she is still in the house, and the entity that is there, that Charlie and that Shiloh, are not real, and they're going to, and then it kind of like dies out, it blanks out. And so she freaks out, runs to the bathroom. Charlie wakes up, comes and sees her, like, what is going on? Like, seems really sincere. No tattoo on her wrist. That is a big key. That is not the original Charlie. Eve freaks out, leaves, ends up getting pulled over by an officer. And so he lets her off. He's like, okay, there's nothing really I can hold you on. So he lets her go, and she ends up back at the house. And she does see, there was something I kind of left out. She has seen a kid twice, or a person twice. It's just never really explained. So it's just one of those extraneous information things that I'm like, I don't know how to work this in because I don't know what it is. So she sees the figure again, and that was literally it, very quick. And then she ends up going into the house. And this is where we enter, in my opinion, a liminal space-esque situation before the final reality we enter. So let's get into the liminal and the final and the epilogue. The epilogue gives us a ton of information, even though it's really, really short. So let's hopefully get into the last bit of the book. It is the next morning. I know this should like seem seamless, but yeah, no, I ended up having to do other stuff last night. So, and this board took a while to write. So I wrote it this morning while catching up on Dr. Odyssey, which is like my new favorite show. That and High Potential, really, really good. 2 brand new shows. So anyway, let's finally wrap this up because I'm ready to be done talking about this book. So like I talked about, see, for you, it's like been a second. For me, it's been a whole day. So I'm like, okay, yeah. So she just walked into the house, and we are entering that strange liminal space of we're in this like in-between where things are existing and not existing at the same time. And it's spaces like this that make me think that there are no parallel universes, and it really is just warped reality, and that this creature is kind of almost stealing people from the real world and bringing them to this other plane of existence and then changing it around them. So I feel like that's what it's gonna actually be, like almost like a Stranger Things situation where you are in a universe that is somewhat like yours, but not exactly. And in this one, it's like ever changing. So I feel like that's what it really is, but I feel like it's way easier to explain it in parallel universes, like I said. The end would make more sense as a parallel universe. So we'll see. Again, we'll see. I really don't know anything. Let's be honest. If you could not tell, I actually don't know anything. So in this little liminal space, she goes back into the house and it is pitch black. She finds that the dinner table is set up for 6. And that's where I kind of got the, okay, we're talking about these people as almost like hosts. They've been there for a while. And that's what it feels like. It feels like they're trying to take the house back over from the guest. She ends up getting an unknown caller on because she stole Charlie's phone. So I'm assuming that fake Charlie found a phone somewhere, like a payphone or something, and is calling her from an unknown number. And she's saying, like, Eve, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? Eve hangs up immediately, wants nothing to do with it, and is focused on finding Charlie. She ends up going into these, like, again, it's like this backspace kind of area. It's really hard to visualize where Eve is in this section of the book because it's just this labyrinth-esque thing that's going on. She ends up running into the hospital gown woman who, again, we still think is Allison, which I'm suspicious that Jenny and Allison and Alina potentially are all the same person because they've talked about green eyes, and at one point Allison is repeating sorry over and over and over and over again. And that's something that Jenny did at the very, very beginning. So I don't know if she just had a run-in with Allison and that's why she was saying sorry like that. But it seems very suspicious that both cadences were very similar. Like Jenny was just repeating sorry. And Allison in this section is doing the exact same thing. So I do find that very suspicious. I'm pretty sure they talk about Jenny's green eyes. And then they bring up that the hospital gown woman has green eyes. So that is also very suspicious. So I don't know what that means because it does seem like Jenny is left in this universe while Allison escapes, but we'll get to that. So I am very suspicious between the connection between Jenny and Allison because it just seems like there's too many similarities. But anyway, she runs into the woman and the woman tells her basically you need to hide and starts counting. And I think hide and seek, which has been a theme throughout the whole book because they talk about how Thomas used to go hide in the basement. Jenny goes and tries to hide in the basement, and now Allison's telling her to hide. I think that is part potentially of the replacement ritual. Like you have to play this hide and seek type of game to try and find your way out, and you kind of like if you can find the person, you are replaced potentially is what's going on. Maybe I'm not 100% sure, obviously. The replacement ritual is not explained. It's just very briefly brought up as a thing that could happen. And it was even crossed out. So who knows? She runs off and she finds herself like potentially a hospital room or a caretaker's room. There's like hospital bed, a wheelchair, a bunch of other stuff that kind of hint that we're no longer exactly in the house, which is why it seems like Old House is just this giant sprawling universe instead of just a singular house. And we also get that hint later when Thomas is having some issues. So we end up finding pictures of the original family of Allison's, which is wild. There's so many pictures of Allison and her parents, so like rock and roll people. It's so much fun. And then there's the new picture of them being very like staunch and very stoic and standing there, and Thomas is in these pictures, but it looks like he's been painted in afterwards, which is like, ew. Like that's really creepy. I don't know what about that is so terrifying, but like that specifically is really scary. So it does seem like this is a situation that basically what Eve is going through now is exactly what Alina went through. A little bit different because I am really curious if Alina was Thomas's first victim as Thomas. Like, cause I think something is possessing Thomas. So I am curious if, because he's grown now, and I think it's almost like the Thomas character is collecting people around him to create a family. That's almost what it seems like. So it almost seems like this version of Thomas, his first steal is Alina's parents, or Alina herself to become his sister. So I don't know exactly. I'm very interested if I really hope there's a second book where we can go through some of this stuff, or the Reddit thread comes up with stuff or cracks some codes. I don't know, but I really need just like more explanation because I am driving myself crazy if you could not tell. Then we find the red gas lantern. This lantern is brought up at multiple points in the story and in some of the documents in the book. And a lot of people are speculating that a lot of people said it was an anchor, but the anchors are people. Like, it specifically says in there, anchors are people or like non-human entities. So I'm not sure about that, but it does seem like the red lanterns are important to potentially the replacement ritual, or they are like a I'm stuck there kind of thing. Like, if you come into contact with it, you're stuck there, or it's a signifier for what house you're in, is what I'm curious. Or it is some sort of anchor type thing that's anchoring old house to different locations potentially. So I don't know, because there's a lot with that red lantern that is brought up in the books. So then we have another like little mini bit. I put it in the reality final, but I still think it's a little bit in that liminal space. So we have, Eve's gotta stop doing this. Eve follows the ants again, and it ends up leading her to finding a version of Charlie who's like super emaciated, almost like vampire-like, and that version of Charlie tells her to hide. So I am curious if there are people that were stolen that can actually take on the identity of other people, because that's what the caretaker said, is they're not what they look like specifically. So I'm curious what or who is pretending to be Charlie, because it even said like anchors and hosts can be neutral spirits or even kind, because they can be helpful. So it does seem like this one specifically potentially is trying to help her, but it's obviously not Charlie, because we know where Charlie is eventually in the epilogue. We got a little bit of answers there. I am curious what these entities, because it said there's non-human entities that live in Old House. So this could just be a spirit that is taking on the form of a version of Charlie and trying to help her in a more recognizable way, because a ghost popping up is not going to be super helpful. You're going to run away from that. So at least showing up as a version of Charlie will kind of get Eve to hopefully listen. So she tells her to go hide. She actually tells her you're not supposed to be here yet. What does that mean? Like that's I'm curious if she wasn't driven crazy enough. Like, she jumped to the final form too early, and she was supposed to go through multiple different realities. Like, she was never supposed to leave the motel that early. I don't know, but she says you're not supposed to be here yet. So I think she got to the final area too early, or she like rushed through realities too fast, because I think Jenny's pretty enmeshed though, but she's playing along really well. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm very curious about that. So we find Allison again, and we actually go through Allison's memories of how Thomas showed up in the woods one day as a kid, and it slowly changed so that she was in this brand new reality. And then Allison's been carrying around this hammer. The hammer is also a point of consistency in this book. She puts the hammer down, almost like an offering to Eve, and it definitely seems like baiting her. It seems like she's baiting her. So Eve takes the hammer eventually with her, and she ends up meeting Thomas, and Thomas is a lot younger. He looks much younger. He doesn't have his graying hair. He doesn't have the pockmarks. He looks very different. And he kind of grabs her, and he's calling her Emma, and she has become Aunt Emma, his sister. And that seems like there's a transition happening. So Alina/Allison is not the sister any longer. So it does seem like Alina or Allison were able to successfully kind of create that replacement ritual so that she's no longer trapped in Thomas's storyline, and now she is free to leave. So everyone's kind of playing along except for Jenny. Jenny does seem like she is trying to point out things. So does Paige. Paige is doing it in her own way. I think Paige is trying to help, not in the best ways, but she is still trying to help, I think, because she gets their favorite bottle of wine, like very specifically, and she's also wearing the locket, and that's very antagonistic, which is how Paige is the whole book. It's very antagonistic, but in almost a way that is trying to make Eve remember things, or to get her to kick them out. So I feel like Paige is an antagonistic but also helpful entity or person at the same time. Paige is a complicated character. And like I said, Jenny is definitely trying to help because Jenny starts bringing up, Jenny's like staring at her with like this unnerving expression and asks her about her wrist tattoo, which Eve has never had. The only person who's had a wrist tattoo is Charlie. And so that seems like a direct, like, hey, remember who you are. Remember, this is not real. Charlie is real. You as Eve are real. Remember this wrist tattoo. And Eve is, I feel like Eve was a little bit dumb here, where she was like, I've never had a wrist tattoo. I don't know what she's talking about. And it's like, think. She's reminding you of Charlie very specifically. So I thought that was really, really smart. So then we see the pendant around Paige's neck and Eve loses her mind and attacks Paige and supposedly kills her. I don't think she killed her. It's almost like something possesses her in this moment, and the corkscrew goes into Paige's neck, and then she kind of runs away because Thomas starts chasing her, and Thomas is really pissed off and really wants to hurt her. And she hears Thomas call the police and says, yeah, come to 3710 Heritage Lane. That is not the house that Eve and Charlie bought. Eve and Charlie bought 3709. And that's where it comes in, remember whose house you're in. So I am curious if 3709 is like real existence of the house, and then it slowly morphs into 37010 or 3710, which is Thomas's version of reality. Yeah. So there's that. There's that. She is not in the correct house, which I was like, holy crap. So it is literally something even separate from 3709. So I don't know. I don't know how that comes in. She ends up hitting Thomas with a hammer because Thomas is attacking her. And then, so we learned something from Allison's notebook, because she did find like a note written by Allison, and Allison said make him mad or upset him. And so when she attacks Thomas, Thomas breaks and calls her Eve. So this is how we know, because for a second there, you are questioning. You're like, is this really just a parallel universe? And this is like, Thomas is good and he has nothing to do with this? Like, it's just like the paranoia that she had winning out? No. Thomas is some sort of entity that remembers everything from every universe. He is controlling something. And yeah, he remembered she was Eve, starts calling her Eve. He breaks because he's pissed off. I was like, oh my gosh. And then she rips part of his face out. Yeah, just like the caretaker. So that's when you're like, okay, the prevailing theory is that a version of Thomas, potentially Thomas no longer possessed, because obviously time is working differently here. Time is all over the place. So the internet is pretty convinced that Thomas not possessed with the giant scar on his face is the caretaker, and he is the old man. So the Morse code at the end, finally you find out that it says, it's like the old man has lived in the cabin for many centuries and goes by many names. It's something like that. Some of the wording is different, but that's pretty what it is. So what is Thomas? Because it's definitely got to be Thomas with the gash in his face. Don't know. Don't know, but it does seem like a version of Thomas is overlooking the timelines and old house in that cabin. But we don't know what it is exactly. So it's just crazy. This book is crazy. So they end up, oh yeah, so she's about to kill Thomas, and the police arrive, and it is the same detective. Detective Kieran is the one who talked to the missing boy. He talked to her on the side of the road. He's the one who pulled her over. And he is now the one arresting her and interrogating her. So either he is part of this universe and is being controlled by Old House, or he is literally just the same person in every universe. Oh yeah, and we also had again, the documents are like super important, but it's easy to forget them. We had an obituary pop up for Elijah Faust, and in the obituary, it says he is survived by his only daughter, only child, Allison. So to me, that is proof that the replacement ritual worked and that she is now out where she is supposed to be. And I bet it's almost like she just reappeared and it's like nothing changed. Like the world went on without her, but thinking she was still there. Like I feel like it's going to be one of those weird situations. So I wish we had learned more about that, but they did put that obituary in and I'm like, she definitely it worked. She's back home. Oh, so while he is, I missed this part again. This is a really important part. So this is another hint at potentially Thomas being possessed by these old gods, is while she was ripping his face up, he is saying, we built the foundation, we built this place, we built the trees up from nothing, etc., etc., etc. And then when she hits him, like really gets him, he says, we didn't, that's not my name. And he switches to I and my. And it does seem like something is potentially possessing him and making him do things. I don't know. I don't know. So that's, oh yeah, so once she is escorted outside, because we're going to jail. Eve is going to jail. We see Allison outside completely transformed. She looks healthy, glowing, happy, but also slightly regretful. So she definitely did a switcheroo with Eve, and that's so sad. That's so depressing, because you feel bad for her because she's been trapped for God knows how long, but in order to get out you have to trap somebody else, and that is so unfortunate. So they go through the whole trial, like they talk to her about interviews and stuff, but really what it comes down to is she ends up in a psych ward and she decides to play along so that she can get out. And Thomas shows up with a giant gash in his face and he hands her the locket and says, I knew this was important to you and Charlie. And it's like, you know, sir, you know everything. Like, because in this world, it's Charlotte, not Charlie. And when she opens the locket, it has the picture of her and the only known picture of Eve Palmer. And I'm just like, that's why I didn't love the ending, because I wanted something more concrete or just a little happy. I wanted her to escape. But I feel like there was no chance of that actually happening. So I kind of hope something happens in future books if we continue in this universe. I hope she was brought up again. So then we have the epilogue. The epilogue is arguably, along with that one big document explaining Old House, this is arguably the most important part of the book. Because it is a forum that Charlie, original Charlie that we never met, and this is proof that we never met her, she says, help, I came back to a house that was recently purchased by me and my partner, and I came back to this house and it looked completely abandoned. It looks like no one's lived there in centuries, and my dog was just wandering the yard, not in the house, just out there wandering around, and it's like my partner has ceased to exist in this universe. She doesn't bring up Thomas, she doesn't bring up the family, she doesn't bring up anything other than that her partner is missing and doesn't exist apparently. And I'm like, yeah, we definitely never met Charlie. This is we never met Charlie, because Charlie never came back. Like, Eve was transported before Charlie could come back from town. That is arguably probably the most important part of the book, because that really, it takes you full circle back to the beginning, which is really, really cool. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope this made sense to you guys. This is probably one of the craziest books I've ever read. I hope you guys enjoyed it, or at least got something interesting about this. I feel like this is one of those videos that's just like, if you enjoy watching conspiracy theories, just listen to this book. So I'm going to continue looking at Reddit stories and see if he posts anything else about the new book, which I hope. It really is called The Caretaker, and we actually learn about the caretaker and what all that is about, because I think that would give us like a ton of hints about this. You guys should see what I did with this book. So I actually tabbed it based on the realities. So you can see it like changes from blue to pink to purple, back to blue at the very, very end. And then I wrote in this book. I don't write in books. I don't highlight, I don't write in books, but I could not stop annotating this book. I think it's the only book I've ever actually like annotated. And you can see like I wrote so many notes in here. And I say so many notes and I'm like showing you absolutely nothing. But I was trying to find the one document, because I wrote a lot in that one. But yeah, it's just like, this book is crazy. This book is absolutely wild, and I cannot wait to read more from this author. I think this author is a phenomenal writer, very engaging, very interesting. It's just so convoluted, and I can see why people don't like it, but I loved it. I gave it a 5-star. I've read it I read it fully once, and then I skimmed it, read it a second time. And I have a feeling it is not going to be the last time I read this book, because if he comes out with another one, I'm probably going to have to skim back through this. But luckily I have this video So I can reference it and you all can reference it if you need to know what happened in this book. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys read this book and liked it. If you didn't, I hope you enjoyed this background. If you have any questions, definitely put them down in the comments down below. I will try my best to answer them. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Hopefully for more book reviews, probably less convoluted than this, and other good October scary things. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next video.